Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. I'm Ashwin Ahmad and I'm in conversation with Ambassador Deepak Bhojwani, and we are going to be talking about the upcoming visit by President Bolsonaro to India. Ambassador, can I ask you, what is the significance of the President's visit to India and what are we likely to see during the visit?
Well, in the first place, as we all know, Brazil is an extremely important country. It's one of the largest countries in the world, a major emerging economy. It's as far as India is concerned, it's what's called a strategic partner. There are very few countries with which we have a genuine strategic partnership. Some are labeled as such, but may not really be so. With Brazil, we share a lot of common interests, particularly multilateral in the global context. We're both former colonies. We've grown of our own strength. We are stable democracies, republics, and also, at this particular occasion, President Bolsonaro is being honored as the President of Brazil by being called as the chief guest on the Republic Day. So this is a big occasion. It's not just another bilateral visit, and I hope it's seen as such.
There's been a lot of talk about the bilateral investment treaty that will be signed, along with an estimated 15 to 20 other pacts. Do you see that as a strengthening of the economic ties, or do you see that as something on the anvil for some time now?
It's been on the anvil for some time. We've had what was called a bilateral investment promotion and protection agreement with Brazil, but all of these BIPAs, what we call, have been abrogated by India a few years ago because there was a trouble with one or two of them, some legal issues which we had not foreseen.
Right.
Now, as a result of that, we refashioned our model bilateral investment treaty, which I understand is going to be for the first time signed formally with any country, with Brazil. And of course, it's no question, these things help. They help a great deal. It's also, I understand, there's going to be an additional taxation protocol, and there's also a social security agreement which safeguards the social security rights, healthcare, etc., of professionals working in either country. Now, the bilateral investment agreement by itself is huge because it guarantees investors certain privileges or certain protections which they don't always take for granted. Tomorrow, if there's a regime change in some country or some legal change, this treaty guarantees on an international level that they can enforce their rights. So it's big for investments, as you know, and most people aren't aware that there are something like 24 major Indian companies. Apart from the Birlas and the Mahindras and the Tatas and so on, there are lots of smaller companies also, pharma companies, for instance, UPL, which have been there for several years. They've actually invested money, not just representative sales offices, but there are a lot of Indian companies that are there, invested and growing. And as you know, this market is colossal. There is a certain level of protection within South American countries, including Brazil. So it helps for us to be invested there. They're not as open economies as, say, the US or some Western countries. So it's not easy to trade with them. Nor do we have what's called a free trade agreement with these countries. So a bilateral investment agreement helps because then it helps our companies to invest there and take advantage of their investments to not just trade, but also exploit the markets around there and lots of other synergies.
I want to come to the issue of oil. There's been a lot of talk that, Brazil could and perhaps export more oil to India. Is that feasible? And, can we look at that given the turmoil in West Asia? How feasible is that?
It is already feasible. It's been happening for many years. In fact, for 2 decades now, we've been importing lots of crude oil from Brazil. And the crudes are compatible with our refineries, particularly with the West Coast, Reliance and so on. They're heavy crudes. But Reliance has been, at one time, till a few years ago, crude oil import from Brazil and petroproduct export in return by Reliance primarily to Brazil. There were almost term contracts, if I'm not mistaken, constituted 40% of our bilateral trade. Even today, I was seeing the statistics because of this upcoming visit. In 2018-19 financial year, our import from Brazil of crude oil was something like $1.6 billion. Overall, Latin America accounts for more than 15% of our crude oil import. So it is definitely feasible because the very large crude carriers that are now in operation can make it viable for crude to be sourced from wherever. And of course, the companies adjust their prices.
I want to talk about the larger perspective of our relations. Historically, Brazil supported Portugal in the case of Goa, and in 2009, it sold Pakistan about 100 missiles, which I think took India by surprise. And India at that time put pressure on Brazil not to do so. So I want to know, is Pakistan sometimes an irritant, if I might say, in the India-Brazil relationship?
Not to my experience and knowledge. In fact, Brazil is not a country that, in my experience, I was there over 15 years ago. Over a decade ago. I don't think it's the sort of country that would be interested in balancing any country or taking advantage of a situation.
Right.
I'm not fully aware of this transaction on the missiles, but if and when it did happen, it would have been transactional. I'm
Right.
sure it's not part of any strategic arrangement and so on. It could have been that certain material is available with a certain country and it sells it surplus, whatever. Brazil is almost a pacifist country, although it doesn't profess to be such. It has agreements with all its neighbors. It hasn't been at war for a century and a half, and has given up its nuclear program
Right.
voluntarily. So I don't see Brazil, and as far as India is concerned, it has been very clear that Kashmir is a bilateral issue for India. It does not get involved in even what we see is a certain tendency on the part of certain countries to tell us what we should do or not do. So in that sense, I would say that everything Brazil has done
Right.
has almost been in consonance with what we would expect of a friendly country.
I also want to come to the issue of China. I've read that, like India, Brazil has concerns about Chinese investment within Latin America. So I want to know how, and they have other issues of interest at the global forum, as in expansion of the UN, etc. So how are both these countries, cooperating on that global level and on a bilateral level?
Well, as you know, as far as permanent membership of the UN Security Council goes, we've got what is called the G4,
Yes.
along with Germany and Japan,
Right.
who are the two other major powers who don't find a seat because of the World War II history. Brazil and India have definitely a right on their own merit because they are major emerging economies. They are world players. Brazil also has a major voice in world forums. They now head, in terms of their bureaucratic heads, the WTO, and they are in many multilateral forums acting very actively. Apart from that, we are both members in the BRICS. We are both members of the G20. And so there is a wide canvas on which we interact.
Right.
And Brazil has made its voice heard very sensibly. For instance, when this controversy came up on responsibility to protect,
Right.
Brazil came out with the Brazilian diplomacy came out with a doctrine called responsibility while protecting, where they actually articulated what countries should do to protect populations who are at risk
Right.
without affecting the sovereignty of the nation state which is in question, and so on. So they are a very imaginative diplomatic power. And I think what we will see about Brazil going forward as it grows in strength economically
Right.
is that it will automatically attract more attention and gain more weight. So this is in India's interest.
Right.
Because what we need is an ally that is unlike a China, Russia, South Africa, US, UK, etc. This is an ally which we have much more in common with because we have a common colonial legacy.
Right.
We've come out of it. We are determined to be self-sufficient and we are utilizing our talents. In the case
Right.
of Brazil, natural
Right,
resources. Case of India, our technology and our manpower to benefit each other's populations.
Is there a lot of Chinese investment in Latin America, and is it causing concern to
Sorry,
Brazil?
I didn't address that issue. I don't think the Brazilians are too concerned about the Chinese presence as of now. The President Bolsonaro has had on occasion some kind of comments he has made about the Chinese being too strong in the region and that they'll be buying up the place and so on. But since then, after taking power, after coming into office, he has softened his tone. And as we know, for the last several years, China is Brazil's largest trading partner.
Correct.
It's also a major investor. It's a provider of finance, something which the whole world needs right now, not just Brazil. So Brazil has tempered its attitude, even under President Bolsonaro. I do not see Brazil opposing China's presence in the region, perhaps selectively. On the other hand, they have not joined the Belt and Road Initiative because they don't feel the need to. Plus, the Belt and Road Initiative in Latin America is purely a circumstantial sort of construct that they say that, okay, whichever project the Chinese are financing or are present in will form part of the BRI. But that really doesn't say very much. On the other hand, they do appreciate Chinese investment. The Chinese market is absolutely unavoidable for Brazil as an attraction. So there is this mutual need, the mutual magnetism, which draws one to the other. But I don't see too much hostility either on the part of Brazil or, for that matter, other countries in the region.
I want to now come to Bolsonaro himself. I mean, he has come here, and it seems with a large business delegation. So it seems that he's very keen to do business with India. But at the same time, we know what a temperamental person he is. Can India rely, if I may use that word, on Bolsonaro as an ally, and that that they can do business with him?
Well, the fact that Prime Minister Modi has met Bolsonaro on 3 occasions, will meet for the 3rd occasion in 4 months.
Right.
They met in Osaka for the G20, they met in Brasilia for the BRICS summit in November, and now here. I think there must be a certain degree of chemistry. I'm not privy to that.
Right.
But there must be a certain understanding, if not a chemistry, between the two persons, which will enable the establishments, because it's not just a personality. I mean, the relationship goes beyond. Under President Lula, from 2000 to 2010, we had 2003 to 2010, we had a golden age, so to speak, of India-Brazil relations. It was upgraded to a strategic partnership. But that doesn't mean that after President Lula, things sort of went to pieces.
Right.
So the relationship survives and even thrives. Under President Bolsonaro, I see no negative signs.
Right.
So it can only get better.
That brings me to my next question. How popular is President Bolsonaro within his country? Does he command the mandate that our Prime Minister does?
My own take on this politically is that President Bolsonaro won the election. There was a massive wave of unrest, if you recall, before the election, on grounds of the political scandal, the corruption scandal, etc., concerning the Brazilian company Odebrecht, as a result of which there was a sort of a move against the Workers' Party of former President Dilma Rousseff. On the other hand, the PMDB, which was of President Temer, who was in power just before Bolsonaro got elected, had also become very unpopular for various reasons. My own feeling is that the Brazilian population, and I'm not making any value judgment here, was extremely agitated and frustrated with the governing class as such. And then Mr. Bolsonaro made a campaign which was extremely successful.
Right.
In the first round, he took a pretty large lead over his rival, Fernando Haddad, who was an appointee, he was indicated by President Lula as his preferred candidate for the Workers' Party. He got a lower percentage. In the second round, Haddad made up ground and came up, if I'm not mistaken, to almost 43% worth of votes and so on. So President Bolsonaro won that election, but it's anybody's guess how things will go.
Okay.
The latest polls reveal that he may have lost a little ground, but then which politician doesn't after being elected? It's very hard to say how popular President Bolsonaro is in his own country. He's a very strong-willed person.
Right.
And sometimes that can alienate certain sections of the population. It can attract certain sections of the populations. So it's anybody's guess.
Finally, I just want to ask you, post the president's visit, what do you see as the next steps that India and Brazil could and should take?
Well, there's an action plan that's in the works. I expect it will be signed. I'll have to have a look at the action plan, but I understand it's pretty wide-ranging across the board. which means we're talking about strategic, science and technology, agriculture, economic, trade, and so on and so forth. Now, a lot depends upon both establishments. And as you know, both establishments are fairly disparate.
Okay.
For instance, disparate, not desperate. Disparate in the sense that we have a commerce ministry that may have its own agenda. We have a finance ministry that may be reluctant to lower tariffs, say, or whatever. We've managed to get the bilateral investment agreement through, thank God. At least that is something that gives a certain degree of stability to the relationship. The Social Security Pact will help because, let's face facts, investments run on companies, but also the people who actually run the companies abroad. And for them to feel secure is a big deal. If we can get the president to impress upon his partners in Mercosur to lower tariffs through an extension of this trade agreement, it would really help. I see that as a possible outcome in the sense of a possible progression. If we do have more collaboration in the defense sector, for instance, it would help our Make in India program, and I think that might be somewhere we could go.
Okay.
Science and technology, there are huge possibilities, not just in space, but even in biotechnology, in pharmaceuticals, in agriculture, and a major aspect of our collaboration is biofuels, on which I understand there's going to be a tremendous amount of agreement, perhaps even a written document. Now, Brazil, every liter of gasoline or fuel in Brazil has at least 25%, if not more, of biofuels. It is a superpower in terms of biofuels. It is the world's largest producer of sugarcane, and it could provide us with ethanol, for instance, if the price is right, if the thing works out, but also technology. So I see biofuels as a major area in which we can move forward in concrete terms. I see also animal husbandry as a major area we could move forward in. I see agriculture, collaboration, back to back, also as a major area. And then I see the investment scenario. The investment scenario where Indian companies have invested upward of $2 billion in Brazilian hydrocarbon sector.
Right.
We are in the automobile sector, invested there. We are in the pharmaceutical sector. The pharmaceutical sector holds a lot of promise. Information technology. TCS has got thousands of Brazilians employed. Not just TCS, but other Indian IT companies also.
Right.
I mean, the world is open to us. The sky is the limit.
Ambassador Bhojwani, thank you so much for your insights. I'm Ashwin Ahmad. Thank you for watching.